So young, not an ounce of tired.
So pliable.
Just like Ryan Williams. Same age.
The Chiefs moved to 4-0, but it comes at a cost. Should they be trying to make some moves to make their team better? Let's talk about it.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Welcome into a live edition of the KC Laboratory, presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC, our incredible partners in Possible, here at KC Sports Network. Absolutely tremendous company. If you're looking for SBA loans, you should go check them out. They are great. I am here with a great friend of mine, Matthew Lane, rocking the incredible hair that is still going, and also wearing is that a TCU Horned Frogs shirt? That looks like a Dr. Seuss TCU Horned Frog is what that looks like.
You sound, what's the word? Jealous, sour, like a hater. I don't know. There's a couple words that are coming to mind here. It's a great shirt from Home Field Apparel. The Chiefs have definitely. Hey, listen, the Chiefs have taken sole ownership of first place in the AFC. That's a good thing right there. Late toast game, early toast game. Chiefs are in first place of the AFC. Let's go.
To that, Hardy LaCroix.
Unfortunately, as we wait for more news, there's a big loss. That's probably the most important news out of the game. Wasn't that the Chiefs won and they started the season 4-0. We all have seen it. We've heard about it all day. Well, I guess or not heard about it based on how the information's coming out. Rashee Rice gets hurt, injures his knee, leaves the game. The reports start out very negative, very timid about his availability for the rest of the season. It's reported as they feared he tore his ACL. So what's the latest, Kent? What's the latest? What do we got today?
Well, and yeah, hey, context clues. Andy Reid flat out saying it's not good. It typically does not hold well. If you look at the track record, Andy's very vague about stuff, and he was even saying that. But things have seemed a little bit more positive-ish, I guess, all things considered. And this is the latest from Adam Schefter as of about 30 minutes ago. After further testing on Rashee Rice's knee today, there remains uncertainty over the extent of his injury per sources. After consulting with team doctors and receiving second opinions, more tests are required to determine the full extent of Rice's injury and his recovery timeline. No answers are expected until next week. So they haven't really announced any kind of ACL tear yet, which was largely feared by everybody else. Very vague, still some, they're figuring out and determining the extent of the injury, but it also, I'm not going to say there's like a ton of hope necessarily, but it's not as cut and dry as it seemed to be. And as Andy kind of indicated a little bit, right? It seems a little bit, I don't know if there's hope, but just that they still don't know entirely. And that is at least of interest to me.
Yeah, I really don't know. Spoiler, not a doctor. Kent is not a doctor. Kent is not a doctor either. So we will defer medical knowledge to those that, know a lot more than us, but we're here to speculate a little bit right now. And I don't even know where to go with speculation on this, because it sounds like the way that Rapshi gave a report today that the test done in the locker room, on the field, whatever it was, that he essentially failed the test. And there's a couple field ACL tests you can do out there. There's an anterior drawer test, the Lockman test. It sounds like the way Rapshi ordered it that Rashee Rice failed that. Now, that's no guarantee that you've torn your ACL when that happens, but it's pretty accurate, right? Like if there's enough movement in the knee, it's pretty accurate. So if he failed one of those tests and now they're going back to get all their images, getting everything done, and it's coming back with conflicting results, maybe that's why you're seeing multiple different doctors. You're getting second, third, fourth opinions. Maybe there's more damage than they initially thought. Maybe there's less, and they're just trying to figure out why. We honestly have no clue. It could go either direction at this point in time. And I know that's a lot of words to say. We have no idea. We just have to sit back and wait. Right. I do think the biggest thing that sticks out to me. No matter what the injury is, I would be shocked if this doesn't result in at least a short stint on the IR. I don't think that you hyperextend your leg like that and don't suffer some form of it, at bare minimum, a deep bone bruise, probably some PCL damage or something, some form of structural damage that is going to land you on the IR for at least, the 4 weeks, maybe a couple extra weeks on top of it. But right now, there's no confirmation or guarantee that this is a season-ending injury right now.
Which is all you can hope for at this point, I guess. And yeah, it does appear that it still will be a long-term injury, and it doesn't seem like anybody is really saying it won't be, something that's going to require an IR.
True, Andrew.
So this team is going to be without Rashee Rice for at least some period of time. I would be stunned if he's coming back after the bye week or anything like that. Andy Reid's already ruled him out immediately for this Saints game, and we'll see where things go from there. But look, the wide receiver room, injuries keep piling. Things keep piling up for this team, right? We've looked at, Hollywood Brown and his season-long injury that will, likely sideline him for the duration of the regular season, and hopefully they're able to get him back in the postseason. And now you're looking at the Rashee Rice situation that, although has a little bit more hope, still looks pretty bleak. And so, this team is in a situation where they have Travis Kelce, who had a great game against the Los Angeles Chargers, but has, had some struggles early in the season. You've got Xavier Worthy, who stepped up and played a good game against the Los Angeles Chargers in the absence of Rashee Rice. And then you have the 2023 Chiefs after that. So I think, it's worth, it is worth, looking at, this team and what kind of, options they could potentially have out in the trade market if they were to want to try to pursue, getting another body back into the room here. Matthew,
before we go to trade talks, I think it might do some help to kind of set the table on what losing Rashee Rice kind of means for the team. Not just they're losing their number one receiving option stuff, but if you look at the structure of Andy Reid's offense, yes, every wide receiver is supposed to know every single position. That doesn't mean, though, that there's certain wide receivers or certain guys or all of them that don't prefer to play in one spot. They don't prefer to use in a certain way, even if they have to learn the entire playbook. So losing Rashee Rice, focus on what Rashee Rice does. He plays in the slot for the Chiefs. It's what they like to call their zebra position. That's what he plays the majority of the time. Sometimes this year they've played him out as an X wide receiver a little bit, but his role essentially is going to be a lot of the shorter routes over the middle of the field. They're giving him a lot of the option routes. They're trying to get him the ball in the move. Not manufactured touches, but schemed open touches in space so that he can use his yak creation and get a lot of one-on-one options with linebackers, with safeties on option routes. That's the position that you're losing. You look to players on the team, Xavier Worthy, he's the guy that we all kind of want to step up, right? He's not asked to play that position at all right now. We don't know how much of that playbook he currently has. The Chiefs have asked him to learn it. He said that he's worked on all the positions, right? But we don't know how much of playing in the slot and running these option routes and doing this stuff he knows. He's mostly played as their Z. He's mostly played as their flanker out wide off the line of scrimmage. You probably want to get him going in the slot a little bit more. That's probably where he's the best. You just don't know how much of that he knows. Justin Watson primarily lines up as an X wide receiver. So you just got to know what you're replacing. We're about to talk about some guys, and some of these guys are going to be better one-to-one fits for Rashee Rice. Some of the guys we're about to talk about probably would play Xavier Worthy or Justin Watson's role better than Rashee Rice's role. And then you have to move other bodies around. So I do think it's at least worth noting that what you're losing in Rashee Rice is going to be a little different than some of the players that are available for trade that we're about to talk about. And that's worth considering for the team when they, are talking about guys they might want to add.
And I think as of right now, if the Chiefs were just rolling with who they have, they'd be dealing with, replacing Rashee Rice in the aggregate. So it would not be there. Like you said, there's no one-to-one replacement. With Xavier Worthy, they tried to get involved in some of the ways that they were going to involve Rashee Rice. And I think, the sprint out route call that they made to Xavier Worthy on the third down very easily could have been Rashee Rice if Rashee Rice was in that game. We've seen him do it for him. That's typically a play that they would probably run to him. Don't know about the under route to Xavier. That very easily could have been an interchangeable route with him. They tried to throw him
the week before. It was probably his route.
They tried to throw a screen to Xavier Worthy out on the edge, and the ball's tipped. That also very well could have been both. Could have been Rasheed.
Yeah.
When I heard, like I remember, like if you're looking at like how to get, from a manufactured touches perspective, makes sense to get Xavier Worthy involved. And you kind of notice every play I just described was outside the numbers. I don't think the Chiefs want Xavier Worthy to be the guy that is going to line up as the third and the number 3 receiver to one side and try to break off a slant against a slot DB or a linebacker that can get their hands on him. It's not something that you really want him doing. You don't want him running over the middle of the field, evidenced by where he's won, where he's been throwing the football, and where they've asked him to run routes. So if you want to talk about trying to get Xavier Worthy involved more with more manufactured looks, more of these easy completion type plays, and where Rasheed might have filled in for some of them, sure, understand that. If you're looking for someone to try to run an option route out of empty from the number 3 look, it's probably, like, as of right now, it's probably Juju Smith-Schuster that you're calling. You're calling his name and trying to let him run an option route there, a little slant. Those are the kind of.
No, and with him, you lose all the yak ability, right? Like, that's the trade-off. And like, that's why, to your point, you're probably trying to replace Rice with a combination of guys, but even trying to do the combination, you don't have anybody that can go run your option route and then pick up yards after catch, because Juju's not making anybody miss at this point in his career, like once he has the ball, really. And then Xavier Worthy, you don't really trust him to go catch a crosser with a linebacker bearing down on him at this point, or at least we haven't seen them trust him to do that.
And are we sure we want like basically the Chiefs best receiver right now, that 171 pounds, doing that anyway? Like, I don't think the Chiefs are wanting to try to put him in harm's way right now either.
If the options are Xavier Worthy getting 3 targets and anybody else getting 7 targets in the game, yeah, probably, right? Like, if that's what I'm dealing with, is if we can't get more than 3 targets to the outside receiver, then no, I probably won't. But yeah. But anyway, I wanted to talk about like their current room and what you have to replace with Rice. And then if you do move a Xavier Worthy around a little bit, if you do end up having to move Justin Watson, like there's, whoever you add is going to probably not play directly in Rashee Rice's role, judging by the names of the guys we're about to talk about. So I think it was just worth, noting that Rashee Rice is a little bit of a unicorn play style wise compared to what's available.
Yeah, you're not getting an apples to apples comparison for him, even in acquisition, if they were
unless
to
Debo's
go.
available.
So, yeah, no, and I don't think that's going to happen. I just have a feeling. So, let's look at some of those options though, and what the Chiefs could be doing, at the wide receiver spot. I think the first name that has really popped a lot is Amari Cooper. And Amari Cooper with the Cleveland Browns had his contract restructured this offseason that basically gives him it's probably the most tradable asset in the National Football League at this point. If you're talking about a receiver that is on an expiring contract that has $1.2 million in total for the entirety of the season for any acquiring team, they basically restructured that contract to allow him to be traded. If push came to shove, if this situation presented itself, I think Amari Cooper is an extremely tradable asset. Had a good game against the Las Vegas Raiders this last week, which was his best game of the season. I think he led the Browns. It wasn't against the Browns, but he had a nice game this year. One of the 4.
It was against the Giants. He had a very good game.
That's right.
It's also hard to say because Deshaun Watson is playing worse football than Patrick Mahomes on his worst quarter right now.
He's been
so
bad.
It's really
bad.
It's really hard to see what Amari Cooper can actually do. That said, I think you can go back to last year and watch, or you can even just watch Amari Cooper's highlights this year. There's been some unlucky drops. There's been some poor passes his way, but like you watch him play. And I mean, I said this a couple weeks ago, I think, and a DM somewhere to somebody. Amari Cooper's like the perfect mercenary wide receiver in the NFL right now, because on any given week, he can give you like legitimate wide receiver 1, like alpha wide receiver gameplay against the best competition. It doesn't matter who you line up across from Amari Cooper. He's still got all the athleticism. He's still got all the skill that he can beat anybody, tight man coverage, no matter what. He can go off for 100 yards and multiple touchdowns against any corner in the league on any given week. His consistency isn't always there, but that's always in the bag for him. He's great at beating man-to-man coverage. He's very good against zone. He plays on the outside. He wins on the routes that are considered difficult or high leverage, and he beats press at press man especially. He runs a vertical route tree. He wins in the intermediaries. Like, he does all of the really, really hard stuff really well. So, like, I think for that reason, that makes Cooper a good fit for a lot of teams. Oh, and then, like, he's never really complained about target share. Like, as long as the environment around him is good, he's getting paid. I want to be very clear. As long as he's getting his money and the environment around him is pretty good, he doesn't care if he gets 1 target in a game or 10. As long as he is having a good time and the checks are cashing, he's not going to complain or be like an issue in a locker room either. So, like, I think he's just like the perfect mercenary wide receiver, because you're never going to have to pay him $30 million a year, but you're also going to get a guy that, you know, a couple weeks every single year is going to essentially win a game for you.
Targets over the last 4 games, 8, 12, 8, and 9. So he was 8 targets, 4 catches, 35 yards against the Raiders. The game that he had a nice little game, 7 catches, 86 yards against the Giants, and then including a long of 24 yards. Also had 2 touchdowns in that game. Yeah, I think he makes a lot of sense from, like, actually being able to fit his contract. If the Chiefs were trying, if they get worst case scenario with Rashee Rice and they're ready to trade him, and they're ready to trade for somebody, Amari Cooper, I mean, makes a lot of sense from fitting in the cap right now. You know, the way the contracts work in, you know, a lot of these contracts work in the National Football League is, you know, your base salary, the amount that is owed over the course of the season obviously changes because there's less games being played. And so the trade deadline can become more affordable than what it is currently today. So some of the players that you might talk about are going to be a little bit harder to acquire, you know, today versus 4 weeks from now, because it's 4 more game checks where that number can be reduced a little bit. But like Amari Cooper, you don't have that problem. If you really wanted to be aggressive and try to secure his services today, if the Browns are ready to punt on their season at 1-3 and they're ready to move on from Amari Cooper, he'd make a lot of sense because he's already fitting underneath the cap and he's still got good football left. He's even proved that today, or this season. There's a lot of structural within this offense fit. Like, he can line up in a lot of different spots. Andy did make some comment about, you know, familiarity within the offense, and, you know, wasn't necessarily speaking about acquiring a receiver, but, you know, speaking about, you know, some of the challenges that can exist with some of these, you know, midseason acquisitions and all that kind of stuff. So that could be, you know, if they were to go to grab somebody like Amari Cooper, there could be some learning curves there, which would be all the more important for the Chiefs to try to make the move now on Amari Cooper if they really wanted him.
The good thing about the fit with Amari Cooper, right, is you would now get a wide receiver that you could funnel the offense through once everybody gets on the same page. You now get a target monster wide receiver that can handle the same amount of volume Rashee Rice was handling. Now, it's going to look different. You know, Amari Cooper throughout his career has essentially played a fourth at the high end of his snaps from the slot. His average depth of target is definitely over 10 yards almost every single year. He's much more of an intermediate threat. His yak, especially lately, is kind of middling, right? That's not his game. His game is not catch and run. His game is go get separation, which even this year, even though the stats are way down, he's still in the top third of the league of wide receivers, you know, by most separation data, whether it's PFF or the Fantasy Pro site. So he's still good. It's just, it would look a little different and how the Chiefs offense would have to funnel through him. And you would have to figure out the rotations. Is Amari Cooper just going to come in and play as an X wide receiver? And then now you're going to have Justin Watson have to slide around where you fit him in, which is fine. Like, I think that's a good spot for Amari Cooper. That's what he does in Cleveland. Or are you going to try to work him in the slot, work him in off the line of scrimmage? So there is some stuff that's not a perfect fit, but I do think the fact that he can be the target getter, he can lead your team in targets and still be efficient on those targets, is very alluring if you're the Chiefs right now. And then the contract, the overall talent, like, there's a lot of things that would make sense about Amari Cooper, even if I think it would change how the offense has to function a little bit.
Deontay Johnson's also another name that's thrown around a lot. And by all indications, It seems as though Deontay Johnson was a player that the Chiefs were interested in acquiring this offseason. But the Pittsburgh Steelers weren't particularly interested in trading him to the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, good news. He's a Panther now. And that means that the Pittsburgh Steelers have no control over where he goes at this point now. Johnson, also another player that could make some sense within this offense. Chiefs looked into him by all indications. $7 million base salary for the course of the season. That's prorated over this, the entirety of the season. So we're 4 games in, that reduces that number. Could be more of a deadline type deal if the Chiefs were looking to do it, and he'd be pretty cost effective.
Yeah, wide receiver wise, I mean, he's kind of similar to Amari Cooper and where you play him, mostly an outside guy. A little, he spent time his early years in Pittsburgh being a little bit more of an underneath receiver that was creating more yak. And like he kind of kept that even until last year, even though same thing, his average depth of target, he's more of a intermediate guy than a short receiver. But I think you're getting still a similar concept to Amari Cooper. You have a guy that you can funnel a fair amount of targets to all 3 levels. And I think the little difference between him and like Amari Cooper is that you can get him going in yak. Like you can get him the ball on the move and expect him to make a guy miss here and there to pick up extra yards. The issue with Diontae Johnson is there's definitely questions about him in a locker room. Right. Like I said, with Amari Cooper, there's no concerns about him coming in and making a mess of a locker room. Diontae Johnson, and it's Pittsburgh, and there's a lot of other big personalities that have gone on in Pittsburgh. So maybe it's just a thing there. I don't know if we've heard too much coming out of Carolina about him yet, but there are just some rumors that they didn't love the example that he was setting for George Pickens in Pittsburgh. That was one of the reasons, the rumors that they wanted to move on from him. He also has been a guy that has consistently been hurt, whether he's been able to play through it or not. He's missed time or played banged up. So these are all things you have to keep into consideration. But just from a pure talent on the field, again, like Cooper, I think he would slot in pretty well. The offense would have to adapt a little bit to the style of receiver he is. But again, it's a guy that you can funnel a ton of targets through, that can be your clear lead wide receiver. And now you're kind of opening up more space for Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy, not only by creating more yards after the catch and throwing the ball short, but like you're able to stress teams over the intermediate areas of the field, which will hold safeties, allow Worthy to get over the top. So it almost might be a better pairing than what Rice is if he was able to play at his highest level.
Yes. And if you're talking about kind of just like finding and identifying areas of the field where players win, like I think that completes the puzzle better than where it might, with even within Amari Cooper. Now Cooper's a tremendous talent and might be a little bit more tricky to, completely fill the route tree up, right, if you will, and find ways to get people involved in, the entire areas of the field. But yeah, Diontae Johnson from that perspective does make a ton of sense. And it helps. I think that takes a lot of pressure off of Xavier Worthy too. Just like I think him specifically would take. I mean, all these guys are going to take pressure off him, but I think Diontae Johnson could really take some pressure off of Xavier Worthy too, and let him continue to be the guy that the Chiefs are hoping to have in year one, right? Because
I think the way that he and Cooper win, the fact that they can win to all 3 levels, but like they're going to be eating up the intermediate area, it not only allows Worthy to operate deep, but it's going to open up like the underneath stuff too. Like you look at right now, you throw a screen to Xavier Worthy, half the defense is worried about Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce catching the ball within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. That's not the case with those other kind of true number 1 outside wide receivers out there. So yeah, I think those guys might open up a lot of space for Xavier Worthy in a different way than even Rashee Rice, who, this year's been better than both of them, right? You want him going forward over these guys, but they might be able to open up a little bit more space than he does going forward.
There's a few other names we want to talk about, but we're going to take a break and we'll be back right after this.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us. Appreciate you hanging out with us here on KC Sports Network. Looking at some of the trade targets that could be available for the Chiefs either now or in the future. Another name that's been thrown out recently, and I think I saw someone making a comment here about it just a minute ago. Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport mentioning also to keep an eye out on DeAndre Hopkins, another name that has been tied to the Chiefs in recent memory. 2 off seasons ago, there was a lot of buzz around DeAndre Hopkins potentially joining the Chiefs that eventually did not materialize. He does wind up leaving the Arizona Cardinals, goes to the Tennessee Titans, who are unfortunately beating the Miami Dolphins right now. We kind of need them to continue to lose for the sake of their draft capital being more valuable to the Kansas City Chiefs, and also for the potential of a DeAndre Hopkins trade. Actually, point blank, I'm going to ask you this, Matthew.
Yeah.
Do you think trading them back their own 3rd round pick is too much for DeAndre Hopkins at this point?
I mean, yes, I do. But not wildly, right? Like It's not crazy. It's not crazy, but it's a little bit more than I'd want to give up for Hopkins. I mean, like, Hopkins is the same, I think, as like a Cooper and Deontay Johnson. It's another outside wide receiver who's played more in the slot, lately, but he's still not creating a lot of yak. And I will say for Hopkins at this point in his career, he's not giving you much of a vertical stretch. You're really fighting a lot of short stuff. Maybe you're eking out some intermediate routes with him. And I think he would clearly be beneficial to the Chiefs. If they traded for him, I would be ecstatic because I do think he would still come in right away and be wide receiver one. But I think he is a clear step down from those other two. And the guys we're talking about, like this is a step back, not a large one, but a step back from a Cooper, from a Deontay Johnson, just in terms of running the offense through them. I think at this point in his career, Nuke is a little bit more of a second or third option, a very good one, but like a guy that you want to use purely as a possession wide receiver, which the Chiefs now need without Rashee Rice. It's just I don't know if that kind of gets you this is going to create the same amount of space as the other guys might.
Well, I agree, and I actually think the skill set's a little bit more narrow at this point in his career than what you're talking about with what Deontay Johnson and Amari Cooper
still had 1,000 yards last year.
Still a good player, definitely. And there's still there's a jump ball element to his game. There's a ball winning element to his game that the Chiefs just don't do a great job of using, and it's not really in Patrick Mahomes' typical procedure to try to throw a lot of fades. Now, if he had a DeAndre Hopkins type, maybe he'd be a little bit more willing to do that. But I think, it is a little bit more of a tricky fit for what this team does. Now, am I worried about them being able to scheme him open? Am I worried about him being involved in this offense? Absolutely not. And I think he's a net positive, and I think he raises the floor of what this team needs. I think that's really what, you're kind of trying to look for at this point. I think personally is finding somebody that actually raises the floor of this offense to a level, that they aren't today. And some of the names that are probably going to get thrown out, like, and we can throw a couple of them out here in a little bit, but how much do they raise the floor? How much impact can they really make? I think this team needs to be looking at more established type players than they do, flyers. Like we see names thrown around every now and then. It's like Demarcus Robinson. Demarcus Robinson's not a huge needle mover. He's another guy that knows the offense, has some chemistry with Patrick Mahomes and all that. But like, I don't know if he's a guy that I'm overly excited about this Chiefs team acquiring necessarily. So I think Hopkins is one of the last that I think does raise the floor in a real tangible way to make this offense better.
So like, I think somebody like D-Rob would raise the floor. I just don't think it raises the ceiling. And I think at this point, I think they need to raise the ceiling just as much as the floor, right? Like getting another Justin Watson level.
That's a fair assessment too. Like I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. Sure. It's just like, man,
so my thought is
the floor is important to me at this point.
No, it is. But like Juju being inserted into a real role, you essentially to me should be the floor raiser, right? That should be better than what they got from Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney last year, right? Okay. That's you're setting the floor with whatever Juju has left in the tank, which admittedly might not be a lot, but like that's kind of your floor move. If you bring in a D-Rob, yeah, you add another guy kind of on that level. He's probably got more juice, so it's a little bit more Justin Watson-y, which is like fine. That's good. That helps the team, but I'm not getting excited about it. I'm with you. DeAndre Hopkins secures a floor that's higher than what it is now, probably secures a floor that's equally as high as it was with Rashee Rice. I just don't think the ceiling is as high with him, or you could hope the ceiling is as high with him as it was with Rice, I guess is more of the angle I'd be going for with that. Hopkins at least gets you close. There's some other names out here. Like we talked about a lot of guys right now that are outside wide receivers. And if you're doing that, you have to figure out, is Xavier Worthy coming off the field? Is Justin Watson coming off the field? Is Juju just taking a bunch of reps? Like, how are you going to sort this out? If you want to find like a legitimate, like 1-to-1 replacement kind of for what Rashee Rice did, he's a more expensive. You probably have to extend him or figure out how it's going to work. Christian Kirk might be on the trade block the way the Jags are playing right now. Pure slot guy. At some points in his career, he's been a good yards after the catch guy. He's not going to really work a ton down the field. He's a guy that makes a little bit more sense to directly replace Rashee Rice. Another guy that I've kind of been on for a couple of years now. I wish the Chiefs would have traded for him instead of Kadarius Toney, Darius Slayton from the New York Giants. He's tricky because I don't think he comes in and you immediately think this guy's going to pick up the offense really well, be this very consistent adult in the room kind of wide receiver, but he's been a productive wide receiver for the New York Giants, multiple years over 700 yards, plays out of the slot, plays out wide, gets a fair amount of yards after the catch, right? So like, I think Slayton's skill set fits really well with what the Chiefs are losing in Rashee Rice. It's just there's definitely been some immaturity or inconsistency issues to his game that haven't been there with the Cooper, with the Deontay Johnson, with the DeAndre Hopkins, but he's probably going to cost a lot less than those guys too.
I've seen the name Cooper Kupp thrown around a lot, and like I get why people like. I think Peter Schrager's been banging that drum a little bit, but man, Cooper Kupp's missing this week with injury, and Kupp's on the wrong side of 30, and he's expensive. He's very expensive. I get why you would throw that name out there, and that's a big go for it. But like, there's some injury concerns that exist right there as well, and so just from a contractual standpoint, draft capital alignment, I just don't know if that makes a ton of sense. Someone throwing out Kyle Pitts here.
I've seen Kyle Pitts run one too many slants and digs in the NFL, and it looks nothing like it did at Florida. I don't know what happened, but like I might just be out. I
don't think. I think you need to find someone with a more established track record. I think that would be a tricky addition to this.
You need a target eater. Like, right? You need a guy that can take a lot of targets. Like, that's even my qualm with Darius Slayton. I think Slayton's, like, his skill set fits very well. And I think the price tag for him will be very reasonable. And, like, I think from all these sides of it, he's a great fit. But he's not a guy that I can see them funneling 7-8 targets to every single week. Christian Kirk, I don't even know if I think is that much better than Slayton, but you can funnel him a ton of targets. He's proven, throughout his career, he can take that kind of level of targets and consistently get open. So like, I think that's something you got to consider. Unless those targets are going to Travis Kelce, who they finally got ramped up in week 4 this year, and they don't want to run into the ground, you need somebody that is worthwhile of coming in and eating targets. Like, I think that's got to be into big consideration here when they go for it. I wanted to ask you, before we move on, because I don't know whenever you're going to transition us out of here. I don't want to cut you off. I want to get ahead of it.
Fine. Just go ahead.
Perfect. Do the Chiefs make a move before the trade deadline at wide receiver?
Yes. It's small.
Okay.
It's like probably a Slayton level move, right? I think it's probably something. I think it's probably something small.
Well,
and I'll even add
that's higher than what McColl was. So like that's a medium level move.
Yeah, but I don't know how much more than McColl it's really going to be. Like I don't know what Darius Slayton's going to pull. In the trade market. Let's look at Darius Slayton's stats right now. I mean, so 10 catches, 122 yards over 4 games so far.
His career, he's got, I mean, what are we looking at? His career, 3,500 yards, 19 touchdowns. Like, I feel like that's a decent chunk of player to trade for at like 27 years old.
Over 15 yards per catch in 2022 and 2023, 700 and some change in yardage over the last 2 years each.
4 out of his 5 years in the NFL went over 700 yards.
Over 7.
That's bigger than a McColl move, I think.
Think so.
And I like that. So. I would like the move. I just, like I said, I think it's a little tricky to try and funnel a ton of targets to him. That's not the type of player he is. But at this point, beggars can't be choosers.
Well, and even if you look at the games, like you're looking at his reception count on the season, it's a 3 reception per game type look. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here when you're looking at it. So yeah, you probably like to see someone capable of getting a little bit more. I think that's a small trade, or they dig around the remaining free agents. And not that I'm I know, but like Tyler Boyd, some people have thrown out Tyler Boyd. Some people have thrown out Hunter Renfrow, which I don't get. I don't know about. I think, all right, Hunter Renfrow or Tyler Boyd, pick one.
Jeez. Nico or Mihio?
Woo! I think
I guess Boyd. I guess again, this goes back to my thing. I think you can funnel a lot of targets through Tyler Boyd, or at least you could have a couple years ago. He works out of the slot. Hunter Renfrow was very good for like a year or two for the Raiders, but then like everybody realized that he just runs triple move 7-yard routes, and they're always, that messes up the timing of everybody else. It's hard to run a route under 10 yards that requires 3.5 seconds. It looks cool, but it takes a long time. Like, I feel like that's why Hunter Renfrow is still a free agent. Tyler Boyd, I guess, like, you kind of see it.
And that's the Titans too. So like that's another minute trade.
Yeah,
I
don't like the free agents. I think the Chiefs do make a move. I think the Kareem Hunt coming back tells me that I think the Chiefs are in a different mindset this year than they have been in other years in terms of going not all in, but like pushing a lot of chips forward. The fact that they were willing to bring back Kareem Hunt after everything else, which I don't think they would have done any other year if it was an option for them, even if they suffered the same injuries. I think in the front office, they're in a little bit of a different mindset this year. And if Rashee Rice is to miss significant time, not coming back in November, but like missing a significant chunk of the year, I do think they go out and make a move that puts somebody into the wide receiver rotation, not just the depth, like into the rotation, which would be a Slayton type of move.
Yes. I agree. So yeah, I don't know. You're watching some of these bad teams, and Nuke and Tyler Boyd in Tennessee. Maybe can I interest you in a Treylon Burks? No,
No, you cannot.
No, you can't. And I think that's really what it is. Like, I don't want the Chiefs to do what they've done the last couple of years, and I don't want them to do another Kadarius Toney experiment to try to make their team better. It's got to be somebody established.
People forget they traded a real draft pick for Kadarius Toney, and then we're acting like it's crazy that they would trade a real draft pick for a not bad wide receiver. Like, yes, their draft process like kind of duped them on Toney, like a lot of other teams did, hence why he was a coveted player in the draft. But like they traded a real draft pick to go get Kadarius Toney because he was available. Why would they not trade a real draft pick to go get a wide receiver when they desperately need one? Because wide receiver 1 and 2 on their team are hurt, and there are guys available better than Kadarius Toney was ever going to be in the NFL. So like there's precedent right there that they will trade a real draft pick for a wide receiver mid-year.
All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about Kareem Hunt. So looked good. I think rewatching it again, good to see him back on the field. I thought he did some really good things in that game. Looks to be adding some value to this team in the running back room for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Kareem Hunt looked explosive. He looked spry. He said that his sports hernia injury or surgery the offseason prior of last year kind of messed with how his acceleration, his explosion, how fast he was. And maybe I'm willing to buy it. This guy hit, it's a very low bar, but Kareem Hunt went over 15 miles per hour on 2 different carries in this game. And when you go back and watch his carries, it's not like he was ever given a real runway, right? Like he was never in a breakaway situation where he was really opening up. All of these plays were coming in short yardage. He's putting his head down and trying to, burst through a gap in the line, trying to win the edge around Jawan Taylor specifically, oddly enough, who's been a pretty good run blocker this year. So yeah, I was impressed. I thought his vision was still there. He still has the body control to make ridiculous jump cuts. And then when you're going to give a little bit better acceleration than what we kind of saw the last year or two in Cleveland, that's going to play. And then he allows the Chiefs to do everything in the run game that Isaiah Pacheco did, maybe more, because I think he's a more like advanced, a more technical runner. So like there's a lot there. I have a hard time saying that performance from a Chiefs running back wasn't their best running performance of the season from Kareem Hunt.
Well, this is like we've talked about the run game being kind of in a box as far as like explosives, and like Kareem Hunt eclipses 10 yards on one of his carries and it looks good. You're talking about that next gen stat where Kareem Hunt achieved over 15 miles per hour twice in the game. Well, here's an additional layer from Sam McDowell on that. Kareem Hunt reached a peak speed of 15 miles per hour, or 15 plus miles per hour on 2 of his 14 rushes yesterday. That's per next gen stats. Last year in Cleveland, he reached 15 miles per hour on just 4 of 135 carries. It was a league low amongst qualified running backs. So the ratios are starting to look very favorable for him. Significant improvement in explosiveness, speed. And he was never like a super fast guy. Like, I mean, he didn't come into the league running particularly fast, but he looked a lot faster once he got here. Looked spry, looked good. The movement skills, the flexibility through the frame still exists, even though he's on the older side. I was impressed with what we saw out of him, and I think he's your lead back moving forward. Like the only feedback or pushback I might have on that, I guess, is like, how much of a workload do you think you can give Kareem Hunt in 2024 as a 29-year-old running back? Like how much? I mean, I'm sure the Chiefs will try to ride him till the wheels fall off, but like at the same time, how do you load management, or do you even care? Are you just trying to get the next 6 to 8 weeks until Isaiah Pacheco returns and just kind of run him into the ground?
So you're asking me if it's if he dies situation here?
Man, I'm not going to say it like that. I'm just, are we load managing Kareem Hunt?
No, I think this is the least in shape he's going to be all year. And I won't say they like drove him into the ground in this game, but they gave him the vast majority of the workload. I think they will continue to do so. I think P. Ryan will continue to get work. He's actually run the ball pretty well the past couple weeks as well. He's still going to be involved in the passing game. And Carson Steele, I think, is going to get a pretty big step back in the rotation, but he will still be involved. They're not going to completely ice him out. So like, I don't think you're looking at a situation, and it's Andy Reid. The Chiefs are never going to go out there and slam Kareem Hunt into an 8-man box for 30 carries in a game, right? Like that's just not going to happen. So there's already like a built-in, a built-in guide there. Like you can't go over. There's a governor to how much work you can get as a Chiefs running back, right? And so I think it'll be fine. I think he's only going to get in better shape. Kareem Hunt's not a thin fella. He's pretty stocky. He handles contact pretty well. He does a great job. You said it, like he has that body control that makes like every tackle just a glancing blow. And he's still, young. When he was younger, he stayed on his feet through all of those. We'll see if that continues this year or if this is more of a fall forward when you take those shots because we're just a little older. But I don't think I'm worried about the workload for Kareem Hunt because theoretically Isaiah Pacheco does come back at some point in this year. You have seen that Carson Steele in a pinch, even though there's a fumble risk, can give you some quality play at times. Samaje Perine's been okay. I don't think you're worried about load managing Kareem Hunt at this point.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to set the over-under on Kareem Hunt carries of the football.
Okay.
Over-under set at 135 for the rest of the year. Or
How
combined.
Many is that per game?
Sorry, that is including the 14. So he's got 121. So 135 carries on the season. That'd be a little bit under 10 on average. Be about 8-9 carries per game over the course of the season.
Over. I'll go over 10 carries a game for Kareem Hunt. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So we think, so that's kind of, that's what we think the average workload will be. Kareem Hunt had 135 carries last year. He had 123 the year before, 78 in 2021. He's
been being load managed for years.
I'm just throwing it out there. That was just kind of the number I was looking at. 272 carries for Kareem Hunt his rookie year with the Chiefs. And he had 181 the next season. So I think they're gonna use them heavily over here. So we'll go 135 carries on the year. I like it. Anything else on Kareem? Kareem can still catch the ball too. So I think that's something that's going to keep coming as well. We haven't seen P. Ryan be a weapon in the receiving game yet. And even when you go back and look, he's been a good receiving back, but it hasn't been quite as many routes as one would have, I think, hoped, especially for the Chiefs. But even throughout his career, it's been a lot of check down stuff or a lot of just quick outs coming out of the backfield. We will see if Kareem Hunt still has the same route running connection that he did the last time he was in Kansas City. They used him on a lot more real routes. Let's see what that receiving game looks like. And if not, he can still catch all those same checkdowns too and make plays out in space. But I do think there's an element as a more dynamic receiver than what we have seen out of P. Ryan that is possible with Kareem Hunt as well. Yeah, we've seen him run angle routes and shoot routes and
seam routes.
That might have been I think I wrote about that one. I think it might have been an option
Patriots
route.
one, yeah.
Yeah, it might, because I think if the backer widens, he actually has to cross the face of the backer, run an angle, but he walled him, so he ran vertical and then scored. That was 7 years ago. I wrote that, and here we are. Kareem Hunt's back in the mix, and kind of looks primed to be RB1 for the foreseeable future until Isaiah Pacheco returns. I don't know if we spent enough time on Chris Jones in this last in yesterday's show, so I think we probably need to spend some time talking about him. I think this is an exceptional performance yet again from Chris Jones. He's had a pretty solid season to start the year. I would say a lot of people are starting to put his name into consideration for the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. He has recorded 3 sacks. That is, of course, in the absence of one sack or a half sack that was taken away by George Karlaftis, and Chris is very upset about that. But 3 sacks on the season, 2 against the Chargers, absolutely dominant, and a real problem for Justin Herbert in this game.
I mean, I think his pressure rate is as good, if not better, than anybody else, regardless of where he lines up. He's had some big flashes in the run game too, right? Like we've seen some run plays that he's blown up as well, which like not that Chris Jones hasn't always blown up the occasional run play, but like it seems like so far this year, it seems like they're coming at a little bit more of a consistent clip, right? Like it's not just one every couple games. It seems like there's 1 or 2 plays a game where Chris Jones just wrecks a run play. And then he's been unblockable in 3 out of their 4 games, like just legitimately unblockable in 3 out of their 4 games. So like, yeah, he's been as good as he ever has been so far this year. I think the flexibility that Spags and Colin have given him to kind of pick out his matchups when he wants them, to call out the matchup he wants at the line of scrimmage, during a play on a random 3rd down. He doesn't even have to stay somewhere if he doesn't like the formation that's near him or whatever. Like they're giving him a lot of freedom and he is paying it off this year. And there's no Aaron Donald to contend with. So like, he is very much right there in the mix at the top of the NFL for the defensive player of the year. And like, I think this kind of where it gets a little dicey for him is as the year goes on, TJ Watt's a guy, as long as he's healthy, he's going to collect stats. TJ Watt is a phenomenal stat collector. And Chris Jones, while also very good at getting sacks, forcing pressures, a D tackle is never going to quite collect sacks the same way a defensive end can, right? So he's going to have a little bit of an uphill battle, but like you watch the Steelers and Watt's a very good player, then you watch the Chiefs, it's really hard to say that Chris Jones hasn't been the most impactful defensive lineman so far this year. Like it's really hard to build the case against them. The entire Chiefs pass rush is Chris Jones, do whatever you want. Tershawn Wharton's going to get the occasional pressure and the rest of our guys are going to try to clean it up and play contain. And like, it's working really well so far.
Yeah, it's been great. And I think you're talking about a little bit, the Chiefs have given Chris a little bit of freedom, but I do think it has been like a very good give take with Joe Cullen. I think Joe Cullen's done an incredible job unlocking Chris Jones even a little bit more and building that rapport relationship with him, that respect with him to, he's played the run better under Joe Cullen than he did prior. And I think that's something that is a credit to Joe Cullen and how he's handled him. It's been a lot better against the run. Not always as consistent as you'd like, and he still will try to, he'll still try to make some of those splash plays. But I think there's been a lot more consistency, and teams will still try to go after him a little bit. But I do think I think Joe Cullen deserves credit for kind of unlocking this version of Chris Jones where, they've given him a lot of freedom to do what he wants, how he wants to do it. And in return, he's paid him off by playing the run a little bit better, being a better, they can trust him a little bit more within the structure of the defense while still finding ways to kind of just let him be him and maximize himself. So I think that's been really cool to see. And I think this year's been a good representation of that on his 3rd contract in here in Kansas City. Like that's pretty cool to see. Anything else on Chris before we get out of here?
I mean, yeah, I don't want it to be undersold because like we as a podcast have maybe not been as high on other people as other people on Chris Jones. And not that we've ever said he's a bad player. It's a lot of money for a defensive tackle that sometimes hasn't played well versus the run. And at some points he's played just so good that you had to pay him the amount of money that you did, but he's very much making up for it. Like you're paying him a lot of money. His snap counts right now haven't really gone down at all. He's still playing as much as he did at any point in time. As of right now, he's not sack chasing. You've kind of removed that sack stipulation bonuses from his contract. He's not sack chasing. He's playing mostly, there's still some freelance nature to his game, and a lot of great players are going to have that, but he's not freelancing as much. He's playing within the structure, and anytime the Chiefs need a big play, and like this is the biggest thing, and this is what the best players do, when they need a play, he almost always is coming through. Now, that doesn't mean that every time the offense doesn't also make a good play, but you look at 2-point conversions, 4th downs, 3rd and longs when the game's on the line. Chris Jones is almost always coming through. And I do think that is something that marinates with people as we get towards the end of this year. We have to give out a defensive player of the year and we go, well, TJ Watt's been in every conversation and this guy's been in every conversation, but Chris Jones, we've been calling him the 2nd best defensive tackle to the best player we've ever seen play defense in Aaron Donald for all these years. Maybe it's finally his turn to get one that he probably should have earned over the past 4 years where Aaron Donald was kind of in his way. So like, I think there's a real shot that he wins defensive player of the year. He might need Fred Warner to calm down a little bit. He's also playing phenomenal football, right?
Fred. He's playing out of his mind, dude.
He might need Fred to calm down just a little bit, but like, I think he's squarely in the conversation this year. And I do think because the Chiefs are consistently, again, in all these close games where the defense has to make a stop and Chris Jones is routinely showing up as the guy making the stops, like there's going to be a lot of moments that people remember Chris Jones. And I think that helps a lot for the defensive player of the year spot.
And you're starting to see some national people already starting to bring him up. And so, like, I think that's good. The case starts in September. And if he continues to play the way he does, I think you're going to have no problem seeing him up there in that conversation, potentially winning it when it's all said and done. That is going to do it for this episode of the KC Laboratory. Thank you all so much for listening, watching, supporting KCSN. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll catch you later.
Shout out Punt God, best player on the team.